The Mafia boss touched my body, woke desires. Then, I lost control, wanting him more. Lenora Alvarez stood alone at the marble table inside the Campbell Bar as rain slid down the tall windows of Grand Central Terminal. Her coat was soaked, clinging to her arms, dark hair damp against her neck. Warm amber light wrapped the room, soft but heavy, like it was holding secrets. Her breath was unsteady when a presence stopped beside her. Gary Ackerman did not ask to sit. He simply did. The space between them closed without permission. His sleeve brushed hers first. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table, unsure if she should pull away. She didn't. His hand covered hers. Warm. Steady. Certain. The noise of the bar faded. Her pulse jumped so hard it scared her. In that single second his skin met mine. Something inside me woke up that would never sleep again, and I knew I would lose every ounce of control wanting him more. She looked up and met his eyes. Dark. Focused. Like he already knew her answers. Like he had been waiting for her to walk into this night. His thumb pressed lightly against her hand, slow, claiming, and Lenora understood one terrifying truth. Walking away would already hurt. Thank you, truly, thank you for spending these moments with me. Every time you watch, every time you listen, every time you allow these characters to touch your heart, you give life to this channel. Your support is the reason these stories continue to breathe. We're on a journey together, one built on love, heartbreak, healing, and resilience. And now, we're reaching for a new milestone, 10,000 subscribers. It's a big dream, but it's a dream we can reach together. If you've been enjoying these stories, if you've ever felt seen, moved, comforted, or inspired by them, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Your subscription isn't just a number, it's a message that these stories matter, that this little storytelling family is growing, and that we're building something beautiful here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And thank you for being part of this journey. Let's reach 10,000, side by side. Lenora did not plan to see Gary again, yet Manhattan made decisions for her. 2 days after the bar, her phone buzzed with a short message asking if she was free. No pressure. No explanation. She stood on a subway platform reading it twice, heart racing, already saying yes before her mind could argue. Their first real conversation happened on the Roosevelt Island tram. The city stretched beneath them, lights scattered across the river. They stood close, coats brushing. Gary asked simple questions: where she grew up, why she loved sketching strangers, what made her move to New York. He listened without interrupting, eyes steady on her face. When the tram jolted, his hand found her elbow to keep her balanced. He did not let go right away. Her skin warmed under his fingers, and she hated how much she needed that small contact. They began meeting like this, in places that felt public yet strangely private. Short walks. Quick coffee. Long looks that said more than words. At Grand Central's Whispering Gallery, his voice reached her ears even when he stood across the curve of the wall. She laughed, surprised, and his smile softened, like he had been waiting for that sound. When they switched places, She spoke his name and felt it travel to him, unseen, undeniable. Each meeting left her wanting more time. More touch. More of him. One night he took her to the Empire State Building after hours. The city below looked endless. Cold air cut through her coat, and he stepped closer, blocking the wind without asking. His fingers brushed a loose strand of her hair away from her face. The touch was brief, careful, yet her knees weakened. She focused on the lights below to steady herself, ashamed of how fast her body answered him. They spoke about nothing and everything. Music. Silence. The weight of being seen. Gary rarely talked about himself, but when he did, his words came slow, chosen with care. Lenora sensed depth he did not offer easily. That restraint only pulled her closer. Soon, she began to live for the feel of his hand finding hers. On sidewalks. In quiet corners. Once, near Bryant Park, his thumb traced the inside of her wrist while they waited to cross the street. The simple motion sent heat through her chest. She watched the signal change without seeing it, focused only on the rhythm of his touch. She told herself this was dangerous. She told herself she barely knew him. Still, when he stepped away, her body remembered the shape of his fingers. Their meetings grew bolder. Stolen minutes turned into hours. They shared street food on a bench, knees touching, shoulders leaning. He never rushed her. Never crossed a line she did not invite. That patience made everything sharper. When his arm slipped around her back for the first time, guiding her through a crowd, her breath caught. She leaned into him, pretending it was for balance. At the Whispering Gallery again, he stood close enough that his breath brushed her cheek. She could smell clean soap and winter air. She wanted to turn her head. She didn't. The tension sat heavy between them, unspoken, alive. One evening, rain fell hard and fast. They ran under an awning, laughing, soaked. Gary pulled her closer to shield her, his coat wrapping around her shoulders. For a moment, her forehead rested against his chest. She felt his heartbeat. Strong. Steady. It matched her own too closely. She stepped back first, shaken by how right it felt. After that, she started noticing how empty her days felt without him. How her sketches shifted. Faces blurred, but one shape kept appearing, broad shoulders, strong hands, eyes that held her without touching. She hid the drawings, ashamed of how much space he had taken inside her. Their conversations deepened. He asked what she feared. She answered honestly. He told her she was braver than she knew. His words stayed with her long after he left. On the tram again, late one night, the cabin nearly empty, his hand found hers without hesitation. This time, he laced their fingers together. The city moved below them, but Lenora felt suspended, caught between want and caution. She squeezed his hand back, silently choosing him. When the doors opened, neither moved right away. She knew this was becoming something she could not control. Every innocent touch carved deeper. Every goodbye hurt more. Still, she kept meeting him. Still, she waited for his messages like they were promises. Because in his presence, her world sharpened. Colors grew brighter. Her body felt awake in a way it never had before. And Lenora was already wondering how she would survive if he ever let her go. Winter came quietly, settling into Lenora's life the same way Gary had, slow, certain, impossible to ignore. The night he took her to Coney Island, the boardwalk was nearly empty. The cold cut sharp through her gloves, the ocean dark and restless beside them. The cyclone towered overhead, metal groaning as a late ride thundered past. They stood beneath it, sharing a paper cup of hot chocolate, steam rising between them. Gary rubbed his hands together, then reached for hers without asking, warming her fingers between his palms. She watched their breath cloud the air, and wondered how something so simple could feel so intimate. The coaster roared above them again, sudden and loud. She flinched, laughing, and he pulled her closer by instinct. Her body pressed against his chest. The world narrowed. She felt his breath near her temple, his grip firm but careful. When she looked up, his face was inches from hers. There was no rush. No words. Just a question in his eyes. Lenora's common sense whispered caution. Her heart ignored it. Their lips met, gentle at first, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. The kiss deepened slowly, warmth blooming through her despite the cold. His hand slid to her lower back, steadying her, grounding her. When they parted, her knees trembled. She laughed softly, embarrassed, but he only smiled and rested his forehead against hers. From that night on, her body stopped listening to reason. By Christmas Eve, the city glowed. Rockefeller Center pulsed with lights and music, the tree towering above the crowd. They stood shoulder to shoulder, coats brushing, hands hidden together in her pockets. Carolers sang nearby. Children laughed. Everything felt bright and loud, yet she heard only him. Gary leaned in to speak, his mouth close to her ear. His voice sent a shiver through her. She found herself leaning back into him, fitting against his chest like she belonged there. When the bells rang and the crowd cheered, he kissed her cheek, slow and deliberate. Her breath caught, heart racing faster than the celebration around them. She should have pulled away. She didn't. Later, back in her small apartment, she tried to sketch to calm herself. Instead, her hands moved on their own. She painted him from memory, his hands, his eyes, the way he looked at her like she mattered. One painting turned into another. She hid them in her closet, behind old canvases, telling herself it was harmless. Still, she returned to them night after night, adding details she could not forget. The paintings became her secret. Proof of how deep she had already fallen. New Year's arrived with snow and silence. They took the early ferry, the city still half asleep. The river cut cold and dark, the sky pale with the promise of dawn. They stood at the railing, wrapped in scarves, bodies close for warmth. When the sun began to rise, painting the skyline gold, Gary turned to her. "This feels like a beginning," he said softly. His words settled inside her, heavy and hopeful. She kissed him without thinking, hands gripping his coat, heart wide open. The kiss held promise and fear all at once. She felt it in her chest, in her stomach, in the way her body leaned into his like it was answering a call. After that, it was harder to pretend this was casual. She noticed how often she thought of him. How her body reacted before her mind could catch up. A simple message from him made her pulse jump. His touch lingered on her skin long after he was gone. She began choosing clothes she knew he liked, arranging her hair the way his fingers had traced it. At night, she painted more obsessively. His profile. His hands reaching. Moments she wanted to freeze forever. She told herself she could stop anytime. She didn't want to. Her common sense warned her. He still held parts of himself back. His life remained carefully guarded. Yet when he held her, the doubts faded. When he kissed her, the world made sense. Standing in her apartment one evening, surrounded by hidden images of him, Lenora finally admitted the truth. Her heart had already chosen. And her body had followed without hesitation. Lenora noticed the first change on a quiet Tuesday. Gary's phone rang while they were walking near Washington Square. He checked the screen once and turned it face down without answering. His jaw tightened. When she asked if everything was okay, he smiled too quickly and said it was nothing. The word landed wrong. She felt it in the pause that followed, in the way his hand loosened from hers. After that, there were more phones. One slim and dark. Another older, scratched at the edges. He never used them around her for long. Messages came in, brief and silent. When they did, his eyes shifted, alert, distant. He always returned to her, always softened again, but something stayed locked behind his gaze. She tried not to ask questions she might not want answered. They still met, though the places changed. Fewer crowds. Shorter visits. When he kissed her, it carried urgency now, like he was stealing time. His hands lingered longer at her waist, her back, as if memorizing her. Each touch burned deeper, carving need into her skin. Rumors reached her without warning. A woman at a cafe mentioned his name in passing. Not loudly. Just enough. A tone edged with caution. Another time, a bartender studied Gary too closely, respect mixed with something harder to name. Lenora felt the looks before she understood them, felt the weight of what she did not know pressing in. She began to feel watched when he wasn't there. At night, alone in her apartment, she stared at the paintings she kept hidden. They had changed. The colors grew darker. The lines sharper. His eyes on the canvas looked more guarded now, like they were holding secrets she could not reach. She painted to quiet the questions, but the answers followed her brush. Her common sense finally spoke louder. "This is dangerous," it said. "This can hurt you." She tried to pull back. She cancelled a meeting, claiming work. Gary did not argue, but the silence that followed stretched thin. When he finally showed up at her door 2 days later, unannounced, the sight of him shattered her resolve. Rain clung to his coat. His eyes searched her face, worried, open. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. Her fear wavered. She shook her head, words stuck in her throat. He stepped closer, careful, like she might break. When his hands framed her face, warm and familiar, her body answered before her mind could stop it. She leaned into him, breathing him in, feeling safe and exposed all at once. "I don't want to put you at risk," he said quietly. The words confirmed everything she had been avoiding. She should have asked what he meant. Instead, she kissed him. The need was overwhelming, physical, aching. His hands slid into her hair, holding her like she mattered, like this moment mattered. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. That night, she lay awake long after he left, heart pounding. Fear sat heavy in her chest, yet it could not erase the truth. She wanted him. Needed him. The thought of his absence hurt more than any unknown threat. The signs kept coming. He started checking exits when they entered rooms. Conversations cut short. Meetings rescheduled at the last minute. Once, she caught him watching the street from her window, still, alert, like he was listening for something she could not hear. She confronted him gently, hands shaking. "I feel like there's a wall between us." He studied her for a long moment. "There are parts of my life I can't bring you into," he said. "Not because I don't want to. Because I care too much." The honesty frightened her more than a lie would have. After that, the tension became unbearable. Every goodbye felt heavier. Every kiss carried a question. She painted less, afraid of what would appear on the canvas. When she did paint, she focused on his hands, the only thing that still felt certain. Her fear grew, but so did her longing. One evening, she tried to walk away. She told him they needed space. She said it calmly, though her chest burned. Gary listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded, jaw tight. "If that's what you need," he said. She turned and left before she could change her mind. She lasted 3 days. On the 4th, her phone buzzed with a simple message. "Are you okay?" Her heart broke open. She met him without thinking, without planning, driven by the need to feel him near again. When he touched her hand, relief flooded her, followed by guilt and fear. She didn't care. Not in that moment. Standing there, wrapped in his arms, Lenora understood the truth she could no longer deny. Whatever danger surrounded him, whatever secrets he carried, her heart had already crossed the line. And it was not coming back untouched. The gala at the plaza ended with applause and flashing cameras, but Lenora felt none of the celebration. Her dress felt too tight, the room too loud. Gary walked beside her through the grand hallway, polite smiles fixed in place, his hand firm at the small of her back. The moment the doors closed behind them, his grip loosened. Outside the ballroom, she turned to him. "You disappeared all night," she said, keeping her voice low. "You barely looked at me." His eyes hardened, scanning the corridor before settling back on her. This wasn't the place for this. When is it ever the place? The words slipped out sharper than she meant. Weeks of swallowed fear rose all at once. "I don't even know who you are half the time." His jaw tightened. "I told you there are things you can't be part of." "That's not an answer," she said, tears burning. "I'm standing right here, and you keep pushing me out." People passed nearby. Gary stepped closer, voice controlled but strained. "You think I enjoy this? You think I don't want to give you everything? Then why don't you? Her voice cracked. Why do I feel like I'm loving a war? For a second, something broke across his face. Anger. Fear. Pain. Because if I let you in, he said, you could get hurt. The words hit harder than any lie. I already am, she whispered. Silence stretched between them. The distance felt wider than the hallway. Finally, she stepped back. I can't do this anymore, she said. I can't keep guessing. He reached for her. She pulled away. Tears spilled as she turned and walked toward the exit, heels echoing on marble. She didn't look back. If she did, she knew she would fall apart in his arms. The next 3 days felt endless. She didn't paint. She barely slept. Her phone stayed silent. Every sound outside her apartment made her heart jump. She replayed the argument again and again, wondering if she had asked for too much or settled for too little. On the third night, rain began to fall, heavy and cold. Lenora stood by her window, watching the street blur. She told herself it was over. She told herself she had chosen herself. A knock sounded at the door. Her heart stopped. She opened it slowly. Gary stood there, soaked through, hair dark with rain, eyes raw and unguarded. Water dripped from his coat onto the steps. I tried to stay away, he said quietly. I couldn't. She stared at him, shaking. You shouldn't be here. I know. He took a step closer. But losing you hurts more than anything I'm afraid of. Rain soaked them both as she stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. You don't get to say that now, she said, tears mixing with rain. You can't keep choosing for me. He nodded, swallowing hard. Then let me tell you the truth. He didn't explain everything. He didn't need to. He told her enough to understand the danger was real, the distance necessary, the fear constant. He told her he loved her, voice breaking on the word. She pressed her hands to his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palms. I was trying to protect myself, she said. But every day without you felt worse. His hands trembled as they held her face. I don't want a life where you aren't in it. The rain fell harder, drenching them, but neither moved away. Their foreheads touched. Their breaths mingled, shaky and relieved. She kissed him first, desperate and sure. The kiss left them both trembling, clinging like the world might pull them apart again. When they broke apart, she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. We'll find a way, she said softly. He held her tighter, as if promising he would not let go. In the rain-soaked quiet of the street, Lenora understood something had shifted. Love had survived the fear. And this time, she was not walking away. Gary did not tell her right away. After the night in the rain, life settled into a careful rhythm. They moved forward slowly, learning how to stand beside each other without fear leading every step. He still guarded parts of his world, but the wall between them no longer felt solid. It had doors now. Windows. Light. The first sign came as a question. What would you do, Gary asked one morning, if you didn't have to worry about rent or space or permission? Lenora laughed, assuming it was casual talk. Paint, she said easily. Every day. Big rooms. Open windows. Places where people could walk in and feel something. He nodded like he was memorizing her answer. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, he asked her to come with him on a short trip. No details. Just trust. She agreed, nerves tight, but curiosity stronger. They drove for hours, city giving way to quieter streets. He finally stopped in front of a narrow, brick building with boarded windows and faded signage. Lenora frowned. What is this? Gary unlocked the door. Inside, dust floated in the air. The space smelled old but solid. High ceilings. Wide floors. Sunlight pushing through tall windows. She walked slowly, heart thudding, seeing it before he said a word. This was a gallery, he said. Years ago. She turned to him, confused. Why are we here? He reached into his coat and handed her a folded document. Her name was printed at the top. She stared, not understanding, until the meaning settled into her chest like weight. You bought this? Her voice shook. I bought the building, he said quietly. It's yours if you want it. Or if you don't. It's just the first. Her breath caught. The first of what? He exhaled, like he had been holding this in for a long time. I've been restoring spaces. Quietly. In cities you love. Places that used to belong to art and people and truth. I put them in your name, because you see the world the way I forget to sometimes. Tears blurred her vision. Gary, why? Because loving you didn't make me smaller, he said. It made me clearer. She walked the room again, hands brushing the walls, imagining color, canvases, voices. This was not a gift meant to cage her. It was an opening. An offering. You didn't ask me to change, she said softly. I didn't need to, he replied. I just chose where to place what I already had. More spaces followed. A former studio in New Mexico. A converted warehouse in Oregon. A quiet building near the water in Maine. He never announced them. Never asked for praise. He simply showed her, one by one, like laying stones on a path they were walking together. Lenora understood then. He was not running from who he was. He was reshaping the edges so she could stand beside him without losing herself. The realization hit her one evening as she painted late, alone in the first restored space. The windows were open. The city breathed outside. Her hands moved freely, confident, alive. She felt him behind her before she heard him. You did this without trapping me, she said. I wanted you choosing me, he answered. Not depending on me. She turned, emotion thick in her throat. Do you know how rare that is? He stepped closer, resting his forehead against hers. Do you know how rare you are? In that moment, love stopped feeling like risk. It felt like ground. They talked more after that. Not about the spaces, but about time. About what staying meant. He admitted his fear of losing control. She admitted her fear of losing herself. They met in the middle, hands linked, honest and steady. One night, she asked him, "Are you giving up anything for me?" Gary thought for a long time before answering. "No," he said. "I'm choosing what I keep." The words stayed with her. She watched him move through his world with her beside him now, not hidden, not protected from truth, but respected within it. He still carried weight. Still made hard choices. Yet when he reached for her hand, it was not escape. It was anchor. Standing in the empty gallery at sunset, walls bare and full of promise, Lenora felt it clearly. Love had not asked him to surrender himself. It had asked him to make room. And he had. They left before dawn, driving east while the city still slept. Gary turned his phone off before they crossed the bridge and placed it in the glove compartment. Lenora watched him do it without comment, her chest tightening with relief. No messages. No interruptions. Just the road, the quiet, and the stretch of ocean waiting ahead. The lighthouse sat alone at the edge of Montauk, white against grey sky, waves crashing below like a steady breath. There were no other cars. No voices. Just wind and water. The caretaker handed them the keys and left without questions. Gary carried their bags inside, moving slower here, lighter somehow, like the weight he usually held had loosened its grip. Inside, the rooms were simple. Wood floors. Narrow stairs. Windows that framed nothing but sea and sky. Lenora stood still, listening to the sound of waves hitting rock. It felt like stepping into a pause between thoughts. For the first time in months, her shoulders dropped. They spent the days walking the cliffs, coats pulled tight, hands linked against the cold. They cooked simple meals, laughed over burned toast, shared long silences that felt full instead of awkward. At night, they slept tangled together, the rhythm of the ocean slipping into their breathing. Without phones, time softened. Hours blended. Mornings came with pale light and salt air. Gary watched her paint on the floor, canvases leaned against the wall, her movements loose and sure. He said little, but his eyes followed every brushstroke like it mattered. On the third night, a storm rolled in. Wind battered the lighthouse, rain slamming against the windows. They lit candles and sat wrapped in blankets, faces close. Lenora traced the lines of his hand with her finger, memorizing what she already knew by heart. "You're different here," she said quietly. Gary smiled faintly. "So are you." "No," she said. "I'm the same. You're letting yourself breathe." He looked away, jaw tight, as if the truth pressed too close. Near midnight, the storm eased. The rain softened into a whisper. Gary stood and held out his hand. "Come with me." They climbed the narrow stairs to the lantern room, steps circling upward, their hands brushing the wall for balance. At the top, glass surrounded them, the ocean stretching dark and endless in every direction. The light was off, but moon glow spilled through the panes, silver and calm. They stood together in the center of the room, wrapped in quiet. "I used to think control was strength," Gary said suddenly. His voice sounded different here, stripped bare. "If I held everything tight enough, nothing could touch me." Lenora listened without interrupting, heart steady. I built my life around that belief, he continued. Rules. Distance. Always staying one step ahead. He met her eyes. Then you walked into it and made me realize how lonely it was. She reached for his hand. He held it like it was fragile. I was terrified, he admitted. Not of danger. Of needing someone. Of choosing someone when walking alone felt safer. She swallowed. And now? Now I know surrender doesn't mean losing yourself, he said. It means trusting what you choose. The words hung between them, heavy and gentle at once. I've never said that out loud, he added. Lenora stepped closer, resting her palm over his heart. She felt it beat strong and fast beneath her touch. Thank you for trusting me with it. He closed his eyes, leaning into her hand like it grounded him. You changed me, he said. Not by asking. By being. Tears filled her eyes. You didn't disappear for me, she said softly. You stayed whole. That's because of you, he replied. They kissed there, slow and deep, the world far away. The kiss carried no urgency, no fear of time running out. Just choice. Just certainty. His hands rested at her waist, warm and steady. Hers slid up his back, holding him close, anchoring him to the moment. When they pulled apart, they stayed forehead to forehead, breathing together. I don't want to run from my life, Gary said. I want to walk it with you. She smiled through tears. I'm not asking you to be smaller. I know, he said. That's why I can do this. They stood there long after, watching the ocean shift under moonlight. The lighthouse creaked softly around them, old and steady, holding its place against wind and time. The rest of the week passed gently. They swam in cold water and laughed at their own bravery. They lay on the rocks wrapped in towels, sun low and warm. They talked about childhood memories, old fears, quiet hopes. Every night, they fell asleep with limbs tangled, safe in the knowledge that nothing else was waiting for them. On the last morning, Lenora packed slowly, not wanting to break the spell. Gary watched her from the doorway, expression calm and sure. You're different, she said again. He smiled. So are we. As they locked the lighthouse door and walked back toward the car, Lenora realized something had healed inside her. Not loudly. Not all at once. But enough. Love had stopped feeling like something to survive. It felt like something to live inside. October became theirs without discussion. The first time it happened, it wasn't planned as a tradition. Gary simply asked her to pack a small bag and meet him at Penn Station early in the morning. No destination. No schedule. Just a train ticket, and his hand wrapped around hers as they boarded. They sat by the window, coffee warming their palms, city sliding away behind them. Lenora watched buildings give way to trees and felt a familiar calm settle in her chest. Gary rested his knee against hers, close enough to remind her they were choosing this moment together. Where are we going? She asked. He smiled. Somewhere new. That was enough. They spent that October weekend in Chicago. Long walks by the lake. Shared meals in quiet corners. A hotel room with wide windows and rumpled sheets. They talked late into the night about nothing urgent and everything important. When they left, something felt complete, like a circle had quietly closed. The next year, October came again, and Gary did not need to ask. Lenora packed without prompting. He bought tickets without explanation. This time it was Santa Fe. Dry air. Open sky. Warm clay walls and sharp sunlight. They wandered galleries during the day and lay together at night, bodies relaxed, laughter easy. On their last evening, she traced patterns on his chest and realized she wasn't waiting for more anymore. "What are we doing?" she asked him softly. He kissed her forehead. "We're choosing." They never talked about rings. Never discussed paperwork. It wasn't avoidance. It simply didn't feel like the point. Their life already fit. Labels felt unnecessary. Each October, they disappeared again. New Orleans brought music drifting through open doors and slow mornings wrapped in sheets. Seattle came with rain tapping against windows and shared silence that felt full. In Denver, they watched the sun rise over mountains, breath visible in the cold as his arm held her close. Every city became a marker, not of time passing, but of time chosen. On the trains, Gary always took the aisle seat. Lenora liked the window. He would lift the armrest and pull her closer once they settled, fingers finding hers without looking. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. His thumb would trace the back of her hand, a familiar motion that never lost its meaning. She painted less during those trips and felt no guilt about it. Instead, she memorized the sound of his laugh, the way he slept on his back, one hand resting on his chest, the way he always checked the window before bed, then relaxed once the door was locked. In return, she learned his quiet needs. How he liked his coffee. How silence could comfort him more than words. How he softened when she rested her head on his shoulder, like that simple weight allowed him to stand down. Each anniversary, they marked the moment in small ways. A shared breakfast. A note left on the pillow. A slow kiss before sleep that said, "We are still here." Friends asked questions. Family hinted. Lenora learned to smile and answer gently. "This works for us," she would say. And it did. There was no fear of being left behind. No doubt about commitment. Their promise lived in repetition. In showing up again and again. On one October trip to San Francisco, they stood watching the fog roll in over the bridge. Gary wrapped his coat around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Do you ever worry we should make it official?" he asked, not defensive, just curious. She looked up at him. "Do you feel unsure?" He shook his head. "Never." "Then neither do I," she said. He smiled, relief and affection blending on his face. He kissed her temple, lingering there. Time moved differently inside this tradition. Years passed, but October always reset them. It stripped away routine and reminded them who they were to each other without the noise of daily life. On a train to Boston, Lenora fell asleep against his shoulder. She woke to find him watching her, eyes soft, unguarded. "What?" she murmured. Just grateful, he said. For what? For the fact that we keep choosing this. She squeezed his hand, emotion thick in her throat. Their love did not depend on declarations. It lived in touch. In shared mornings. In the steady comfort of knowing they would meet each other again, even after distance, even after time. Every October, as the train pulled away from the station, Lenora felt the same quiet certainty. This was their promise. Not written. Not displayed. Renewed by movement. By closeness. By the simple act of staying. The train rattled steadily along the tracks, fields and towns sliding past in a blur of green and gold. Lenora leaned against the window, her hand resting lightly on the seat beside her. Gary sat close, arm brushing hers, familiar warmth radiating through the thin fabric of his jacket. Years had passed, but some moments carried the same weight they had from the beginning. Some touches never lost meaning. He caught her hand before she pulled it back, fingers curling around hers. Without a word, he lifted it to his lips, pressing a soft, deliberate kiss to the back of her hand. Exactly where it had started all those years ago. The gesture was quiet, intimate, full of memory, choice, and care. Lenora's chest warmed, a slow smile spreading across her face. The world outside could rush on. This moment was theirs alone. They settled into a rhythm only they understood, hands touching, shoulders leaning together. No words were necessary. The years had layered their life with experience, shared joy, hardships, and trust, but at its core, it had remained simple, choosing one another again and again. Lenora watched Gary study the horizon, the train lights glinting in his eyes. She realized love had become something alive, not a static word, not a title or a paper, but a daily, deliberate, uncontrollable choice. Each time he kissed her hand, each time she rested her head against his shoulder, she renewed that choice. Every October train trip, every quiet morning together, every brush of fingers across a table, they had built a life made of continuous affirmation. She thought of all the moments between their first touch in the bar and now, the stolen tram rides, whispered conversations at the Empire State, the rain-soaked reunion in Greenwich Village, the lighthouse in Montauk. Every city vanished to in October. Each memory carried proof of what they had decided again and again, to choose each other without question, without hesitation, without conditions. He turned his head slightly, catching her gaze. His hand remained on hers, thumb brushing softly against her skin. She felt the years in that touch, not age, not change, but depth. The kind of depth that comes from keeping a promise not because anyone told you to, but because the heart will not allow otherwise. I still can't believe we started like this, she said softly, voice barely above the rhythm of the tracks. Gary smiled, thumb stroking her hand. And I still can't imagine a day without this, he said. Without you choosing me. Her eyes softened. I will always choose you, she whispered, and she knew he already felt the certainty in her words. The train hummed beneath them, the countryside rolling endlessly past. Life outside could change, time could pass, the world could demand its weight, but inside this small pocket, love had its own rules. It was neither fragile nor forced. It was persistent, intentional, unstoppable. As the sun began to tilt toward the horizon, golden light spilling across their seats, Gary lifted her hand once more, pressing another kiss to her fingers. Lenora closed her eyes, letting the memory of every past October, every kiss, every city, every touch, anchor her in the present. Love was not a promise written once. It was a choice renewed with each gesture, each touch, each deliberate moment of attention. They had learned it could not be commanded or measured, only lived. And they lived it, fully, every single day. Her heart tightened in a familiar, comfortable way, like coming home. She rested her head against his shoulder, hand in his, aware of the quiet gravity of their connection. It had begun with a single touch in a bar, and it had grown into a life defined by daily, deliberate, uncontrollable choice. That was the kind of love that endured, the kind that carried them across miles and years, the kind that survived distance, danger, and time itself. She breathed in slowly, feeling the familiar warmth, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat under her palm. She had known fear. She had known longing. She had known moments of doubt. Yet none of that mattered in this space. Here, on this train, hand in hand, they had everything that mattered. Gary's voice broke the quiet, low and steady. It's always been you, Lenora. Every choice, every time, without fail. She smiled, tears forming, not from sorrow, but from the depth of knowing. And it always will be, she whispered. The train continued its journey, relentless, carrying them through towns, rivers, and fields, the steady rhythm echoing their years together. Every click of the tracks felt like proof that life moved on, but they moved with it, together, deliberate in their love. Thank you, truly, thank you for spending these moments with me. Every time you watch, every time you listen, every time you allow these characters to touch your heart, you give life to this channel. Your support is the reason these stories continue to breathe. We're on a journey together, one built on love, heartbreak, healing, and resilience. And now, we're reaching for a new milestone, 10,000 subscribers. It's a big dream, but it's a dream we can reach together. If you've been enjoying these stories, if you've ever felt seen, moved, comforted, or inspired by them, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Your subscription isn't just a number, it's a message that these stories matter, that this little storytelling family is growing, and that we're building something beautiful here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And thank you for being part of this journey. Let's reach 10,000, side by side.